Hello and welcome. This is Jim Kaufman with Rankin Technical College. This video is a walkthrough of the Node.js assignments for week 14. So let's go ahead and get started. So there's going to be some Node assignments and there's going to be some React assignments. This will just be about the Node ones. So the first assignment is going to be kind of a question type, question answer type assignment. And so make sure that you create a Node.js folder in your root directory. Go ahead and download this file, right? So let's grab this. So you just come up here, File and Download. Download as a Microsoft Word document. Okay, download as a Microsoft Word document. And then put it in this Node.js folder, which is should be in the root direct. You should create that in the root directory of your repository. Okay. And you're just going to kind of want to go through all these different questions. You're going to have to go through a little bit of documentation to answer those. Let me bring that up real quick here. So Node has a an intro. There's some other. I'll give you some specific links in that homework assignment to some of these. But you will have to kind of go through a little bit of this sometimes to find some of the information. Okay, and also you can use other resources as well. But make sure that you really try to actually learn something here. Don't just speed through this just to get the assignment done. It's important for you to start building a foundation for this. Especially this will be the main concepts that will be covered in the year 2. It'll be called the database-driven development 1, which is basically what's called the MERN stack, and the MERN stack stands for Mongo, Express, React, and Node. Right, and Node is the introduction here. Right, we're just going to touch upon some basics of Node, but we'll get into this much more in the second year. Okay, this is just kind of a introduction to that, right? So go ahead and go through this. I'm going to make some changes to this, and I'm going to change some of these links. Okay, so before you get it, before I actually make it visible, I'll have some changes to this. But please spend a little time, try to learn a little bit, read a little bit. Okay, shouldn't be too difficult for you. But do try to put a little bit of effort into it. Okay, the next assignment is a lab assignment. So here we're going to create some different modules, and that's gonna demonstrate actually the things that these questions here are about. Certain things, there's some that'll be a little bit some basic concepts, but we're gonna be doing modules in the lab. We're gonna write some code about the event loop. We're gonna write code about using binary data, for binary data. We're gonna be using the FS module. We're gonna create a little web server. Okay, so these are all things we'll be doing within the lab assignment. So it kind of goes hand in hand with the assignment, right? The labs. So I already did a video on downloading and installing Node. So you can go ahead and look at that. If not, here's the directions on doing that, the steps to doing that if you haven't already downloaded Node. So part 1, we have let's see, let's not get too far ahead. So in our repository, we want to create a Node.js folder, and then create a part 1, part 2, part 3, and part 4 folders. So let's just kind of do that, even though I know you all know how to do that. So here's my repository, and I'm going to go ahead and create a new folder here called Node.js. And then inside of there, I'm going to create some new folders. And obviously you can actually do you can actually do this within Visual Studio as well, Visual Studio Code. Okay, and I'm just going to go back up to one directory. I'm going to open this up in Visual Studio Code. Let that open up. One thing I do want to point out, and I pointed this out when in the download, the Node, downloading and installing Node. If you have Visual Studio up and you download it, you need to make sure you close out Visual Studio and open it back up so it's there. Okay, so before you really start these assignments, you should come in here, create new terminal, right? And then when you create a new terminal, this is obviously going to be at the root directory, which is Node.js, right? Which doesn't matter for this command, but there is going to be times that this is going to matter where you're at, okay? It's important to be in the correct directory. For a lot of commands here, for just getting the, making sure you got Node installed, it doesn't matter. You should be able to run this command from any folder, any directory, right? So here you're just going to go ahead and check to make sure it's there, Node-V, and there you see it, return that. If it returns cannot find, then it's not installed or something went wrong, right? Okay, and then you can do CLS to clear your screen. I typed the wrong command, that would help. So there. Okay, so I'm going to go to this part 1 folder now, and let me fix my screen so we can look at it at the same time. Real quick before that, let's just go over the first assignment is about modules. Let's go over to the 2 types of modules. So, and this is actually part of that written assignment too that you're going to be doing. So, Node.js primarily supports two distinct modeling systems, module systems, not modeling, module systems for organizing and reusing code. So you have both the common JS, okay, and then you have what's called the ESM, okay, which is the ECMA script modules, okay? There's 2 different types, right? The common one is more the older one, okay? We're going to talk about it a little bit because especially if you start looking at different code on the internet or whatever, you'll see, you'll be able to tell by looking at it what it's using. And it's important that you're using the right thing, the right kind of module. If you try to have it, it might not work depending on what module you use and how you have your environment set up, okay? I'll touch upon that when we get a little, when I show you an example here. But for right now, the common JS modules is the more traditional and the default module system in Node.js. It uses a require function to import modules, okay? And it uses a module.exports or exports to find what the module makes available, okay? Common JS modules are loaded synchronously, meaning the execution of the current file pauses until the required module is fully loaded, okay? So here's just an example, okay? It's doing module.exports, my value, and this will actually export it. So this is an example where you're actually creating 2 files, one my module, one main. So in the main JS, you're going to be pulling this other module in, okay? So to pull this in, being a common JS module, okay, you use this require, okay? So you write it like this, all right? And then when you run this, basically you do my module dot my value, right? Dot my value, and this will go ahead and output 1, 2, 3, right? You defined here. So it's 2 different files. So this is the beauty of Node, that you can actually access different files from you can share different files using exports, okay? And so something a lot more than what we've been able to kind of do in the past, right? In our introductory JavaScript. The other kind of module is a ESM module, okay? And these are more modern, standardized module systems for JavaScript. They use an import to bring the modules and export to expose functionality. So you use an import and export, okay? Imports what you're bringing in, exports what you're sending out, right? Or making available. ES modules are loaded asynchronously, right? All right, so that offers performance benefits, especially in larger applications. So that means when they're loaded, other things can be happening when they're loaded, okay? Synchronous, up here, one would say that, common modules were loaded synchronously, meaning that execution of the current file pauses until the required module is fully loaded, okay? Something simple like this, it doesn't matter, it's small, right? But when you've got something substantial, in the real world situation, you could have a substantial size module that, the application is actually going to pause until everything's loaded, right? Using the common JS. But since the ESM modules are asynchronous, so, other things can be going on while it's loading, okay? To use ESM modules in Node.js, you typically need to indicate this in your package.json file, which we'll cover that here in a minute, by adding a type module, or we can call it .mjs file extension, okay? And in our lab assignment, we're going to call it a .mjs file extension, okay? At the beginning, all right? At the beginning. All right. So here, so our first thing we want to do for this module exercise, it says initialize. Let's just make this smaller. Initialize a Node.js project. Open the part 1 folder in Visual Studio Code. Well, here I just have all the parts. If you want to do one at a time, that's fine. If you want them all here, that's fine. You're just going to have to make sure when you run commands, you're in the right directory. So we have, if you look down here at the bottom in the terminal, this is directories open Node.js, right? So if we're wanting to do something in a certain folder, we need to be in that folder when we run that command. So first thing we're going to go ahead and do here, well, yeah, that's one thing I don't like that does that, because so here we're just going to do a cd part 1. And these terminal things, sometimes it'll get a little messed up here. It'll actually work, but just the way it displays, especially when you get something really big, it could be a little messed up. And then when you start putting things in there, depends on how long your structure is. The longer how deep your path is, right? So, but now we're in part 1, right? So the first thing it's going to tell you to do is do it. Let's go take a look just to make sure here. It's going to tell you to run npm init, okay? And npm init is going to create what's called a package.json file, okay? And it's used for lots of different configuration type setups, okay? We won't be doing much with it, but we're gonna. But when you start using things like React in that, it's going to come into play a lot more, okay? So for right now, this is how you initialize a Node project. Just by default, though, just want to point out, if you're just creating some of these simple little examples where we're not really installing new things outside of some of these simple examples, you really don't need a package.json file. But for the most part, in the real world, you're going to have, when you start really doing anything significant, you're going to need a package.json file, okay? So the way to initialize a Node project is use npm, which is Node Package Manager, and that comes bundled with Node. And as you can see down here at the bottom on the terminal, how it kind of gets messed up when you've got real long file paths here, right? But it'll work fine. So that's npm init, and you click that, and if you go over here now, if you go under part 1, no, I'm sorry, I have to put everything in here. Sorry. Package name part 1, we'll just you can hit enter to accept it, right? So I'm just going to accept that. Version 1.0, description, you know, part 1, entry point, index.js, that's fine. And I'm just, for now, I'm just going to kind of skip all this for the most part. A license, you know, we'll talk about this later. You know, a lot of times you got MIT licenses, different kinds. MIT, I'm just going to put MIT. It doesn't matter, okay, for the most part. Some of this does come into play a little bit more, depending on what you're doing, and we'll discuss that later in the future. But just trying to keep this. So it's telling you the type is going to be common.js. So this might be newer. You know, newer versions always change, and actually when the last version I used was, I actually uninstalled when I went ahead and downloaded the Node package for this class. When I I did that. I actually uninstalled my old one and did a new one. This didn't used to have this like in here, but this is actually going to put this type common.js here by default, and so we may actually remove that just to see our examples work. But okay, so under part 1, it creates this package.json file, and you don't have to worry about a lot of this right now. We'll learn about this later. It did put this type in here, .common. Okay, so by default this is going to be common. Okay, if we change this to module, then it will use the ESM modules. Okay, by default. If it has nothing in here, it will just use common by default. And to tell you the truth, what I'm going to do, just to be consistent with with this assignment, I'm going to get rid of that for right now. So if you're doing the same, go ahead and get rid of that for right now. And I'm just going to save that. Okay, and we can close that. Later on, we'll come back and to change that to module and see how that changes things. Okay, part 1. So the first exercise is saying to create a file named moduleutils.js. So I'm going to come in here on part 1, a new file, .js as a file or folder name. I'm wondering why it would say that. I had a space before the M, so one thing you got to be careful about, obviously, cutting and pasting. So that's why I was complaining about it wasn't valid, because I actually had a space before the M. So here's the module.utils.js. And in here, I'm going to just, I'm creating a basic function here. Okay. Creating a basic function. And then I am going to write it a little differently than that. And then I'm going to go ahead and export that. File as a comment. It may be converted to an ES module. It's just telling you. It's just kind of a warning thing, because really you probably should be telling, because ESM modules is really what you should be using. It still supports the older common modules, because there's a lot of code out there that still exists, right? So create a file. Okay, so we got this file. Now we're going to create another file called modules.js under here. All right, and then in here, we're going to go ahead and do this. And so remember for common, we used require, okay? For a ESM module, we use import. So something to keep in mind. And so like if you, in your package.json, remember we had that type equals common. If you have that type equals module, and then you have this here and you try to execute it, it's going to complain, okay? Because require is the common, right? Not an ESM module. But we should be fine here with this. So now what we can do is to execute this, we do node, and then we type in modules. And actually, whenever you're doing this, you can always, usually it has kind of a, you can hit the tab key and it'll automatically grab it, okay? So here it's got node.modules.js, okay? Now, if I hit the enter key, it should go ahead and print out this greeting, okay? So basically what we did here is we used the require. You use that for common. This is the name of the file, okay? And this is how you access that, okay? You don't have .js here or that, okay? You access it just like this. And you're setting a variable equal to that, and then you go ahead and use that variable called utils, right? Short for utilities, .greet, because in our utilities, we have a function called greet, right? So this should print out exactly hello and the name, right? And we got Node.js developer being the name. We're passing in the name. So let's go ahead and hit the enter key here. And there it did. Hello Node.js developer, right? Okay. So that was the, that is the common type. Now back to this, remember we had that type here, remember? We had type, and we had type being we had type being common, right? Common is the common JS, right? And I'm just kind of pointing this out because we're probably going to always use modules, but you know, if you're out there on the internet, you grab some things. If you have any requires in there, I'm going to show you why it ain't going to work. If you have type equals module, okay, in here, I hope this don't call me, make me a liar here. Now this should really not work because it's going to say that these should be the ESM modules, which are use imports. This is using require. Let's see what happens when I run this. And it did something. It didn't even find it. I was expecting an error, but what this did, you tried to run node.modules.js and it just, oh, there we go. So it's basically saying right here, require is not defined in ES module scope. You can use import instead, okay? So something to keep in mind, okay? With common modules, okay? So that was the common one. Here's the ESM module one. So now we're going to go ahead and create. Now there's two different ways. Now we in our package.json we've got this being module. So let's just go back the way it was. And by default, it's going to be common. I'm just letting you know this for your own background information. Probably is going to be beneficial at some point when you're playing around and wondering why something's not working. Especially if you're grabbing some code from somewhere. So by doing MJS, right? MJS is actually the ESM modules. So even though this is by default now the common, so if we went back to this one, this will work again. If we ran this again, since we got this out of here, let's just confirm that. Yep, hello Node developer. It works fine, not a problem, okay? Now we're going to go ahead and create this other module. And we're going to call it MJS. M stands for module JS. Okay, this kind of older way to do it. Well, I don't want to say older way. This is the older way to do the ESM modules because you can just change your package.json file. Unless for some reason you had mixed files within a project, which probably isn't the best bet. But okay, so here I'm just going to go ahead, new file here. And I am going to do modules es.mjs. Okay, create that, and then in there we're going to do with the following code. Oh, we're making this really simple, aren't we? We're just exporting farewell. We're doing this all in part of kind of one thing here. And then if I go to, I'm going to create this file now. And in here, I am going to do an import from there. Let's just grab that. All right. So we're using the MJS. So since this is ESM, we're using the import, right? So this is an ESM module. And since we're using MJS, this should work. This should work without having, like by default, I was saying by default, since our package.json file doesn't have a the type being module, by default, it's going to be common. The only way we could actually use that import is by doing the MJS files. Okay. So here I'm just going to go ahead and run Node. Just like that. And module not found. Let me take a look at this here. I have an extra letter in here. This should just be like this. And there we go. Goodbye, Node.js developer. Okay. So, just to summarize here, probably the best thing for us to do going forward here, just showing the difference between a require for common.js and a import for a ESM module. Okay. The easiest way just to do everything going forward here, and the best way is to just use the ESM modules, right? And then in here, always have type being module. And then you just call all of your files JS. Okay? You call all your files JS. All right. So next, we're going to go ahead. That was part one. Part two is this event loop. And we're just going to create a new file called event loop. And .js. So just by default, this is going to be a ESM module, right? Since in our package.json file, we've got type module. But we're not really doing any imports or exports or anything. That's probably, and then, just besides that import and export, I was talking about that in the require for the common, it's, there's other things as well that are part of the module system and the common JS system. So it's more than just that. But this here is just basically an event loop. And this is showing the asynchronous callback execution in Node.js. And so if we run this, if you run this enough time, you'll see this in different orders. It kind of depends. So here we're just going to go ahead. Let's make this big now. And so this is something, we did this in our part two, right? So in our terminal here, we're still in part one. So we're going to have to go up one directory. Go to cd ... Now we're at the node.js. folder, we're going to need to go to part 2. So we can do cd part 2 and hit enter. And now we're in part 2, right? So now we can go ahead and execute that here. Node. So start, and so it's kind of interesting here, right? So you got start, end, next tick callback, immediate callback, timeout callback, all right? So it's kind of how the event loop works. So this being synchronous, right? It actually, sometimes you would think it would have done something else, right? But it actually printed start first, right? And since you had a timeout here, okay, it's just doing a timeout. But like we said about Node being asynchronous, it'll keep executing. That's why it executed end here before it even executed other things, okay? Before it executed other things. So let's take a look at a little bit of documentation on this event loop. So a Node.js event loop orchestrates the execution of asynchronous operations. You know, in the different process next tick, set immediate, and set timeout are functions for scheduling tasks within a loop. Okay, their execution order and purpose differ significantly. So, like the next tick callback, this next tick schedules a callback to be executed immediately after the current operation finishes, but before the event loop proceeds to the next phase, right? Execution order, highest priority among these three. So the next tick has the highest priority among all of these, among all these three, okay? Set immediately, schedules a callback to be executed in the check phase of the event loop, okay? It runs after IO callbacks, but before set timeout callback, okay? It's telling you different use cases when you kind of want to use it, okay? Set timeout schedules a callback to be executed after a specified delay in milliseconds, right? So basically, that's gonna happen after the next tick and set immediately of a delay, right? And don't worry, I know that this is a lot, and you don't have to understand all of this. Just wanted to kind of give you a quick introduction. But if you run this multiple times, it will kind of, the order can change. So like we looked at that first one. Let me run this a couple times. Clear the screen. Let me make this bigger. All right. So let's run that. Start, end, next tick callback. Let's run this. Just run this maybe 3 times here. So this time it went from start to end. Each time start and end is consistent, right? Next tick callback. Next tick callback. So that one always ran right after, right? Start, end, and next tick callback, because it said that tick has priority, right? So start runs, and then end ran, and then the next tick callback. Then after that one, timeout callback. Okay, that was this time. This time it called immediate. This time it was back to timeout. So them two are kind of switching, all depends, right? So just kind of interesting that, you know, things can run in some different orders. So it's something you always have to kind of keep in mind. All right. To get back to the exercise, I'm not going to do all of these. But because I want to want to show you some. I want to make sure I go through some of the other things. Okay, so that was for that. Then there's also binary data. Okay, so basically you're going to be doing the same thing now. So we have our things, our package.json set to module, I guess now. So, you know, you can you can call this MJS or you can call it JavaScript. Doesn't matter because we have our type set to module. But this is a binary data and file system one. Here you're doing an import of a this is a node called a node native module. Okay, so it's all part of when you did the download that node, it's there and available. Okay, sometimes we have, you know, you'll learn as we go forward here, we're going to have other modules we're going to be bringing in that are going to be outside of the you know, outside of what we created or what's in Node itself, right? But this is all created within Node. This is a native, called a native Node module, okay, for file system for FS. So we import that. This is just creating a buffer. This is where you're writing a file and reading a file. So this is, you know, something different than you know, what we've done. You know, we have seen an example. We did have an assignment where we could read some data in from a file, import a data, but we couldn't write to the file system, right? But here with Node, you can go ahead and write to the file system. So go ahead and do that. And then the part 4 one is a web server, okay? And so let me at least show you, I'll let you do most of this. This one, we are using this import here, okay? And this is outside, this is not within the node download, right? What we downloaded. This one is one of the native node modules, but this is not, okay? So let me at least show you that. I'm going to show you about installing .env, creating an env file, and adding the port, okay? Because this is going to read that port, okay? It's going to read that port. So let me just show you how to create that part. And so that's in part 4. All right, so what we're going to do here, I am just going to go to, I'm going to get out of here. Let me close all these. CD dot, go back one directory, and then I'm going to go CD to part 4 here. Okay, so I'm in part 4. And in here I am going to, we're going to have to do a separate package.json file, right? So this is only for what's in part 1. That's important to always know, especially when you start getting complex stuff. All right. So this package.json only refers to what's in here, right? So I am in this directory here. So I'm going to do an npm init here. It would help if I spelled right. I am having some issues here. All right. So I'm just going to accept all of this and we're good. This did put common.js. Maybe we want to change that. Is this okay? Hit yes, hit okay. So I'll change this. This is something that's actually newer. Didn't used to do this, but that's okay. So let's just make this module. And then in here, so what we're going to want to do is, the next thing we want to do is we want to install this package. So just for the heck of it here, let's go to npm. That's the registry home. Let's go ahead and search for .env. And this is for doing like environment variables, okay? So here's a .env one. You can see, look at these downloads. You got 303 million. This is a very popular package. All right. Just within this week, he had 75. So we're going to be doing another one. So that, right. So we're going to install this .env package, right? So this is the first time we've installed something external, right? So you don't have to do anything at this website. This is just kind of giving you some information. It's telling you what you can do here, right? So you can do, and also you can use the word install, or you can just use the letter I, just like that, right? So let's go back to our thing. We're in the part 4. That's where we want to install this. If we install this in a different directory, it's only going to be part of that directory, right? So here we can do -I or install, either way, right? This can also be like this. Okay, this is the shortcut. So that's what I is for on that. So either way on that, hit enter here. This is actually going to make a call out the internet, grab that package and bring that in and put that in this node modules directory. Okay, that's what this did. It also, in your package.json file, it added a dependency .env. See, this is the latest. It's always going to grab the latest version. There's ways to grab earlier versions if you need to, but by default, it's always going to grab the latest version. So it's always going to add dependencies to your package.json whenever you do an install. Okay. All right, so that's that. And then the next thing it asks you to do in that assignment of part is a new file, and make sure that you don't forget to put the dot first, the little period, right? You have to be .env, just like that. And that's an environment file, right? .env. You can see there's a little dot there. Make sure you do that correctly. All right. And then let's go back to our assignment here. And so here it asks us to do a port 5000, okay? And that's, I'm just going to do this part, and then you can take care of the rest, creating the server.mjs file, okay? And it's telling you to add a start to this as well. Okay. And actually, I'll do that part too. All right, so that's that. And then, so here, I'm just going to drop that in here. Back to that assignment. So by you doing, the way to access this, right, from this env file, okay, you have to make sure that you have imported that, all right? And then you use process.env.port, and it has to be uppercase just like that for that to work, okay? It needs to be exactly like this for that to work, okay? And then, so what this says is, by default, because if you did something wrong here, or didn't even have this in that file, it'll try to read this. If it finds it, it will use port 5000. If it doesn't find port 5000 in an env file, it will use port 3000. Okay, that's what that will do. Now this other here is for starting your server once you finish write this code. I'm going to let you create this server.mjs file, and I'm going to let you do that, which is not too difficult. So, but here for this package.json file, what you're going to want to kind of do in here, okay, is under scripts here, okay, you're going to want to do this. So the one thing you want to do is make sure when you see some error in here, it's very important that you take care of that. So here, the reason you got an error here is because if you notice kind of all of these, you always have to have a comma after. So after this was some, this is just putting this in there by default, okay? And then you have to make sure you have a comma in here, okay? So here's your scripts that you can run, and so you'll see in here when you when you create your server.mjs file, okay, and you get that all finished there. Let me go back to our assignment here. When you do that, to run this thing, after you create this, you just do run. You have to use run npm.start. Okay, you have to make sure you have run just like that. So run npm start will start that web server. Okay, and it should print that out. And then once you do create that, once you do run that, to stop it, you hit like Control C to stop the server. Okay, so that's just going to create a simple little thing, a simple little server. It's just going to print that out. It's not really going to do anything else. You can run that. It's going to run, and it's going to, pretty much, when you do that within your terminal, it's, the only way to stop it is you need to hit a Control C a couple times to stop that server. So go ahead and give that a try. You should be fine. And obviously you need to make sure you do that part 3.1 as well. Okay. So that's all I have. Please let me know if you have any questions. Thanks and have a great day.